The time is 5:47 p.m. on Tuesday, April 11, 2023. I'd like to call this Finance Advisory Committee meeting to order. I'm going to start with 1.1, appointment of the committee chair. Nominations are open for the chair of the Finance Advisory Committee for a 2-year term, 2023 to 2024. Are there any nominations?
Nominate Mayor.
Councilor Thompson,
Sorry, I didn't hear if Ron said something.
I'm nominating the mayor.
I would second that nomination. I'd also ask that we consider adopting past practices where we've just rotated the chair every year rather than it be a 2-year term. It's a small committee. Ron, if you're open to the idea, then just every year we just take a turn.
I'm agreed.
are there any more nominations? Any more nominations? Nominations are now closed. And may I please have a mover and seconder for the motion? Which is Councillor Reese moved the motion to nominate the chair. And seconded by Councillor Thompson. And are there any questions or comments?
No.
I'll call the vote. All in favor? That carries. So I'm going to pass the chair to the new chair and ask him to begin at item 1.2.
Thank you. So next we have the appointment of the committee for the committee vice chair. Any nominations for the vice chair? Please.
I'll nominate Michael Thompson for the vice chair.
Okay. No, I guess can I second it? I guess I have to, don't I?
For nominations, you don't have to second that, but when you put the vote in, then
Okay. All right, that's fine. Michael, you accepting that nomination?
I was going to nominate Councillor Weiss, but that's fine.
Well, and like you said, we're all gonna rotate eventually, so it doesn't.
All good.
All right, yeah, did you, okay. Okay, nominations are closed, so mover. Councillor Reese and seconded by Councillor Thompson. Because as the chair, I can't second. All those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Next, we have the land acknowledgement. Town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional treaty territory of the Chippewas of Virginia Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues today. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands and the Mississaugas and Chippewas recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective paths brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Now, so can I get, committee, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilor Reese, Thompson, comments, questions? All those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We have 2 items. First up, 7.1, Finance Advisory Committee Work Plan. I will pass it to Rachel.
So through you, Mr. Chair. So this work plan is something that we typically do with Finance Advisory Committee. It just gives an overview to the committee of when we're planning on doing things throughout the year. Also schedules out our line by line reviews where we get into the financial details for each department, and also identifies another some other financial initiatives that we have here as well. So it's not set in stone. Sometimes things do move around or a little bit, but it just gives us an overview of what we'll be looking at for the next little while.
Okay, Any questions, guys? Comments? Michael?
Thanks. In general, the work plan looks fine. It's pretty consistent to what we've done in past years, but I would like, with the committee's approval, to add 2 items to that work plan. I think first, I'd like to continue the work of the service review that was started last term to, get an update brought to the FAC committee, look at some of the recommendations that came out of that, what efficiencies that may have been generated or changes made last year, as well as proposed for this year and going forward. And so just to continue that work with respect to the service review. So I'll leave it to staff to determine what month it would be best to bring that forward. But I just think that it's appropriate for the committee to take a look at it. It may or may not have budget implications. We did it with the idea of generating revenue and savings. So that's the first one that I'd like to see added to the work plan. The second one I'd like to see added to the work plan is really some information and conversation around the town square budget. I think that, collectively we can add some value by taking a look at the overall budget to operate town square and provide some insight and guidance going forward. Because I know that especially, let's hope that it opens and is fully functional in the fall. And then I think that this group can have a hand in trying to help shape and steer the budget so that it makes sense. So I guess I'll make that as an amendment.
And I was just gonna ask, do we need that as an amendment, or do you want me in that direction if we just all agree?
We're good
Sorry,
to-
Tom, you got to speak up.
I was gonna say, if we just all agree, we don't need an official amendment, staff can put that into the work plan. But I'll ask Councilor Weiss if he's okay. Ron, are you okay with that?
Yes,
Those two?
yeah, thank
If
you.
you are, then we'll just, staff will just add them in when they present it, as you said, Michael, when they feel it's an appropriate time of the year for us to start having those discussions on either one of those subjects.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Anything else on this one, Ron?
And maybe it's because I'm new and I went through the document. One of the things that is in there is the issue around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it gave me pause, because in many ways, when we're funding our partners, that partners are required to have a certain amount of direction in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Since we're funding them, it's our opportunity to encourage and almost demand that they move in the same direction as the town is. I realize that we have our own diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's all related to employees and I assume volunteers. But I wonder if there's any interest in extending this to our partners to ensure. So for instance, library, ACC, Historical Society, all adopt those types of policies the same way as we have done. So I don't know if it's in here or whether it's something to discuss.
So the items that we do have in here more relate specifically just to their budget line by line. If we wanted to have that discussion, it might be something that Doug may want to address.
Sure. Doug?
So I guess there's 2 ways of approaching it. If we want to do something specific to diversity, equity, and inclusion, that it would apply to all groups, then I suppose we could give consideration to how that relates to the finances, or what kind of, maybe it's part of an agreement, the next round of after the next budget, because everybody will have had their allocation. The other opportunity to do it would be each of those groups will come up in the course of the term. But that might take too long to see the kind of result that Councilor Weiss is looking for, in terms of waiting for it to come around and asking the board to, the respective group or board to report on their work in this area. So I think either path would be fine. One would just take as long as it takes for those other groups to come to this committee, or we could look at something separate. And bring it to this committee first before either bringing it to council and or bringing it to the individual boards that we fund.
Fine, that makes good sense to me, and in most cases, when people are applying for grants and funding elsewhere, there's usually requirements that they have around diversity, equity, inclusion, around harassment, around conflict of interests, and all of those things, or your funding request isn't even considered. So it's really part of eligibility, and in most cases, they'll allow you months and years to get that done. So I'm not suggesting it's going to be overnight. I'm just considering that it's something that we should consider as a policy that we're going to implement sometimes in the future for funding.
Then maybe what I would suggest through you, Mr. Chair, is that we put the item on the work plan, and that we come with a draft sort of condition or whatever that we would put on all future funding agreements that would implore these groups to take the appropriate action. I mean, it's one of those things that's hard to prove unless you get a complaint. But I think if we're proactive and put something on as a condition of the funding, at least that gives us the right to approach those groups if we get a complaint, or if someone's concerned about the way municipal funds are being spent, and there's by an organization that isn't respecting some of the values of diversity and equity and inclusion that we're looking for. So maybe that would be a good starting point, is just to get sort of a condition of financing that we would see either would both for groups. Would be both for groups that Councillor Weiss has identified, as well as grants that we give in the future. We've got a new community grant program coming, and maybe that same condition should be part of a group accepting a grant from the town.
Thanks. I mean, I was just gonna add, Roy, I like that. I like the idea, and I think that maybe we expand upon it, just have like the actual agreement, whatever it is, above and beyond just PBI, and look at that agreement, and we can have a discussion here at this table, and decide if there's anything else that we want to add in those agreements to make sure that that anyone that's applying for that funding has to kind of adhere to those policies in the town.
Yes, and the other policy that I think maybe it's just in the work plan to look at those kinds of policies, all of them. The other one I brought up at council when we're looking at funding arrangements with groups in particular. I think some of our groups have that already in their bylaws, but others don't. That, for instance, for the first time ever, the Ontario Trillium Foundation has decided that you no longer are eligible for a grant if you have greater than 1 year of your operating expense in place. And I've never seen that before, but they're now cracking down on that as well. And so if you're carrying a large operating reserve as a not-for-profit, or someone who's asking for money, then you're not eligible to receive any money. So we may want to look at some of those thresholds too with those people that we provide funding and grants to, just to make it useful for them. I know it's a double-edged sword when you say you want to spend all the money you get, because then sometimes, I wouldn't suggest that it always happens, but some frivolous expenditures may occur, and we don't want that either. So it's something it goes on a work plan as a policy item.
Yeah, so maybe we can act as like grant funding applications agreements. That's an item that we can have a really deep dive and discussion about it. Michael, you okay with that? Adding that in as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, I like the idea, I mean, whether we call it sort of an eligibility or a criteria checklist, and whether or not, the expectation is those community groups, follow the town's policies, or at least have to have their own policies developed and adopted. I mean, those are all good conversations. I think that for sure, there should be certain standards that we uphold to any of our organizations that we provide funds to. And so how we frame it, it's good for the discussion. Absolutely.
All right, so go ahead.
If I may, it just occurred to me too, that oftentimes we're asking organizations to do something that we would like them to do, yet we don't give them the resources to be able to do it. And so perhaps we need to think about that from a budgeting standpoint, that we have some assistance to these organizations to help them with their DEI strategies, with other types of things. So it's fair for them, and we don't just dump it on them. And we give them a little bit of a runway so that they know that in year 1, 2, 3, this is what the expectation may be. That's all I'm suggesting. So
I think it's gonna be a good discussion.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks.
That's it on this one? Okay. Anything else on this one? Otherwise, I'll ask someone to move in second. Someone moved by Michael, second by Ron. All those in favor? Opposed, that carries. So next we have our council budget principles, policy, Rachel?
So in the previous term of council, there was a similar document, council budget principles, and it sets the overall guidelines for essentially developing the budget for which staff work with towards developing the budget comes before council. So we reviewed those principles. We've also taken into consideration some of the things that happened since then, such as the approval of the fiscal strategy. And we also recognize that there's more work coming on the asset management plan as well. Some of the general guidance is essentially following through with the fiscal strategy, but also for on the tax levy component of it. So looking towards essentially roughly a 2% inflationary increase, except in years of extraordinary inflation. So that does give us a little bit of flexibility. As I'm sure we didn't expect to be in this position that we're in right now or have been. And then it also provides for that guidance on the fiscal strategy component of that 1%, that it will be in the future, once we get the asset management planning in place, it'll be tied to that asset management plan that would be approved by council would be. So that would all come from direction from council, but essentially be 1%.
Comments, questions, those? Move the recommendation. Ron, second by Michael. All those in favor? Opposed, that carries. New business. Michael? Ron?
And if I may, just looking through the document, there was a discussion in here about engagement, public engagement. And it says that we're to increase engagement over the previous year. Are there any targets in place for that? Do we know what kind of engagement has happened on the budget item in previous years? And are we searching for a number and that we can put in place?
Well, I'll start with this and then I'll ask Jason to fill in because he's been leading our engagement activities. So it is very challenging to get people engaged to talk about the budget. We do have a public open session council, which has not been attended in the past few years. So we have to engage in other ways. Jason has led some initiatives in cooperation with the communications team to do surveys and get information, put road signs out. We encourage people to engage by offering a draw for a gift card. So we have seen increases. If you wanted to expand on that, Jason.
Sure, we haven't clearly established a target or goal to achieve, but we are always looking for different opportunities to engage. So as Rachel mentioned, we've tried all kinds of different ways of surveying people through the web and actually going out to events and with a tablet. We'll take the survey, a short survey on the tablet, trying to go to the people. Or we have a dedicated web page. We'll continue to have that. So every year we do work with corporate communications to develop a strategy for engaging. We've tried all sorts of things and we haven't had a tremendous amount of success. Certainly no statistically valid type results, but we do get some results and we do consider those results in the budget each year.
Thank you. Through you. Do we have any idea of why we have such low engagement outside the budget? Is, with all due respect, sometimes can be a little dry. But and it also can be complicated, and people may be not thinking that they have a significant impact on it anyway. So being someone that likes to be closer to people, is there something we can do to simplify it, make it more interesting or more relevant to them? Just because I think it's important.
So one thing I can tell you that we are looking at doing is definitely be able to elaborate when we're gonna, I think we're gonna be able to this budget. So we're gonna create so we're gonna do a series of videos, but it's gonna be one of the videos that we put out there. Kind of make like Windows for Dummies. We're gonna try to really make it simplified video explaining the budget in very simple term, basically like, can't take money from capital and just shift it over, right? It's gonna make the operating go down.
Right.
And just really simplify for everyone to have a full understanding of the basics.
Sure.
So that's one thing that we're looking at doing. I know that in previous years, we offered like gift cards and stuff like that for people to fill out the surveys. That didn't really work. But I think it is to your point, Ron, I think it's simplifying it as much as possible so people have it. It's just easy language to understand, because yeah, you're right. I mean, you saw it when you hit the budget binder and it's overwhelming. It's just for, you know, regular residents to be looking at that binder. It can be very different.
And I think we've done a lot of really good work in the last 4 years of actually making it more understandable as well,
And
right?
sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but if you saw the binders 4 years ago, what they are now, they're a little bit more easier to follow and understand.
Now, I just believe that if people get that understanding, you can cut through the complications, you can get down to the real important messaging, then we might be able to get more involved in it. So I wanted to find out. And when we say we're going to do public engagement, I'd like to see what the metrics say and how much are we really doing, and then how valid it, to Jason's point, is how valid it is. So just a comment.
But as you witness at the OP, you know, whether it's budget, whether it's the OP, open house, whatever it is, you see the numbers that come. Right? I mean, it's
Sure.
if you get 30 people, it's like, wow, that's amazing, right?
Mhm.
Where, you know, we'd all love to see more people come out to those things, because more engaged they are, the better off, not only what we're doing, but as a town. So, absolutely. So anything we can think of, hopefully maybe we come up with some new ideas during our time sitting here. So, yeah. Michael, did you want to add?
Listen, I think it's a great point to bring up, and I think we should always, you know, challenge ourselves and challenge staff to try to keep pushing the bar to engage more of the residents in the process. You know, I think certainly this is something that goes back to Daniel and see from a communications perspective, you know, what other ideas or avenues he might think we can pursue to try and, you know, increase the engagement of the residents in the process. You know, as been mentioned, you know, every year we have this conversation and try and come up with new and innovative or creative ideas to get residents involved in the process. And we've tried interactive tools and different forms of media, but, you know, even though it's not been as successful as we want, we should continue to try and push and find other ways to get more people involved, because, you know, it's a critical process, and it would be great to get more and more residents' feedback and involvement in the process, because at the end of the day, you know, it's their money. So absolutely, let's you know, try and identify some metrics as well as some other ideas to pursue to raise engagement again this year.
One other thing that I had highlighted in here had to do with the expense for studies. I assume including studies, the capital budget should be built upon four pillars, and, you know, having to do with capital asset management, developing new assets and other projects, including studies. So what kind of studies? Are these studies that are done by consultants, or are these studies done inside? Through you?
So they're typically done by consultants. They include things like the official plan, master
Got
plans,
it. Okay.
development charge studies. And
For hire?
yeah,
Great. Now, I'm no accountant, but from a cost accounting standpoint, is there any way in our budgeting process where we can identify the amount of time and cost for our staff? Because it seems to me that we say we would like to get a staff report on this and another one on that and another thing. Is there any metrics around that? Is there any way to manage that from a costing standpoint, or at least identify what the cost of a study is? Because maybe we would be less interested in sending them for a staff report, et cetera. So just want to.
so through you, Mr. Mayor, it's difficult to estimate. Like each study could take different amount of time and other reports depending on the amount of work that it requires. And we don't track our time down to the hour on what we're working on. So to have that you need that type of granularity to really understand how much it costs to staff time to do work on a particular initiative.
So we just don't have that. metric set up for somebody to say, I've worked 47 hours on this and 22 hours on that, and here's what
Big
it
reference
costs.
in this.
And maybe it's not of much value either. It's just that it seems that we send a lot of things to our staff and they get overloaded with a variety of reports. And it'd be interesting to see what it actually costs us in terms of that type of thing. Just something to think about. That's all I had then. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. Ron? Second, Michael? All those in favor? All carries, we adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.